BroadwayCon family, get ready. Please welcome to the main stage Playbill's senior feature editor, Ruthie Fearberg.
Hello, BroadwayCon. Has everybody had a great first day? Oh, good. I'm so glad. This is really one of the most amazing events of the whole theatrical calendar. I'm so thrilled that you're here tonight. Our guest tonight is a certified Broadway and dance legend, the kind you call Ms. So Ms. Donna McKechnie, she made her Broadway debut in 1961 in the ensemble of How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, was one of the Hullabaloo dancers, came back to Broadway for The Education of Hyman Kaplan, and then Promises, Promises, had a stint on television's Dark Shadows, starred as Kathy in the original Company, Ivy in On the Town, then originated the role of Cassie in A Chorus Line, Emily Arden in State Fair, and standing by for Chita Rivera in The Visit, all on Broadway. She's toured as Charity in Sweet Charity, performed in A Chorus Line all over the world. She's done Follies and Gypsy and The Glass Menagerie. She's done The Wild Party in London and The Pajama Game in D.C. and Halftime in New Jersey. And now here she is, a Tony Award winner, still dancing, still teaching, podcasting, the great Miss Donna McKechnie.
Ruthie, I didn't mean to come in on your speech, but it's like, I thought.
I mean, I really, but I think it's important that everybody knows that it's not just A Chorus Line, right?
Oh,
there's
thanks.
a real, you sowed your seeds here on Broadway, and you've continued to do it for decades, which is just
You're so
wild.
far away.
I know, we are a little far. Should I move this table back so that we're a little?
It's okay.
Closer? Okay.
I'll adjust.
Okay.
But
We'll adjust to the blocking and the
This is my
design.
first time here, and I just hear it's the first day, so, and I can see so many people. Well, I got to come back and see everything. Did you have fun today? So yes, I came to New York from Detroit, Michigan, and way before you were born, 1959, and I had really good training in Detroit, good ballet training, and got my first Broadway show, and I thought it was so easy, you know, because it was easy then, and then I realized if you stay more than a year or two from show to show, you really have to love it because it's not easy, right?
Right.
But anyway, I've just been blessed with so many wonderful shows and to work with so many great people. So.
Well, I want to rewind to even more of the beginning, because I think the beautiful thing about A Chorus Line is that we know a very little bit about your story and what was told in the character of Maggie and dancing around her living room. But, like, did you really start dancing around your living room and then your parents put you in dance class? Were you in dance class and that made you start doing ballet around the living room?
Well, it's like one of the nice things about, well, the wonderful thing about A Chorus Line, one of the things that I think is special is that it speaks to so many different people, and we all are fundamentally the same. So I was just a kid, a toddler, who every time I heard music, I would just get up and start dancing. How many people here did that? I know I'm not the only one. I know I'm not.
I did that, definitely.
Yeah. I know you did. But that was the beginning, and my mother, you know, was my champion. She saw that I loved it so much before I could speak, and so she took me to ballet class, local ballet class, and that's when I fell in love with dance, music, and.
Did you notice, did someone notice that you were different from the other dancers in your class, even at a young age?
I don't know. I think I had a ballet teacher who encouraged me because she saw how much love I had for it, because I just was a very shy person, but a kid growing up, but when I danced and the music spoke to me, I was able to express myself from the inside out, which is what I love working that way, and that's how I was trained to work. Actually.
And you grew up strictly in ballet, so when was the first time that you did anything akin to theater dance?
I got my equity card when I was in 12th grade. There was a traveling group, what they called winter stock, like summer stock, at the Cass Theater in Detroit. And they needed one local dancer. This was a company from New York, dancers, singers. They did 4 shows, I believe. Bittersweet, Guys and Dolls, King and I, and another one, I'm not sure. And so they needed one dancer. So my girlfriend in ballet class said, why don't you come and watch? And I said, well, I'd love that. Because I'd never been to an audition. I didn't know what they were.
It's always the girlfriend who asks you to come along, Cheetah Story. Yeah. Let's go audition for this tour. Right. And then, Cheetah Rivera.
Yes, I remember her talking about that. I don't know quite, it might be the same thing. Anyway, it's like an old story. I sat there and she said, well, do you want to audition? And I said, well, I don't have any dance clothes. So she said, well, I have an extra pair. Okay, so I got the job and she didn't. But we're still friends, so that's
a good friend.
And that made me realize that, oh my gosh, you can be on a stage with other people and tell a story with song and text and dance and be so,
Because you were auditioning with that style of dance from those shows.
I never saw a show before, so this was an incredible education and experience. And Anna, and the woman who played Anna was Betty White. Betty White was like 40 then. She was quite a wonderful Anna. She sang beautifully and great actress. And let's see, who else?
I mean,
Jeanette MacDonald, you might have to Google that name, but she was my mother's favorite singer, and she was a great star in film. And she was a great soprano. Jeanette MacDonald, Nelson Eddy did all of these films. And she was starring in Noel Coward's Bittersweet. It was the end of her career. And I would stand in the wings. I was 15 years old, and she was so brilliant. Her voice was still that light soprano. And I would stand in the wings and just admire her so much because she had, anyway, yeah, you have to interrupt me. I will go on.
Don't worry. We want to hear all of it. So you were 15 years old your senior year? You're young.
I wasn't. Senior. It wasn't. I was just started my senior year.
Just starting your senior year, and you get this job, and rehearsals were in New York, right? But
this was the first.
This was
job.
Local.
And then the director called me. I see where you're going.
Yeah.
And then the director called me a little while. I'm still in high school, and he said, "We're going to do this dance tour, a little company, and we're going to rehearse in New York for 4 weeks, and then tour the South, mostly one-night stands for about 5 or 6 weeks. And do you think your parents would let you go?" So I asked them, and they said no. And I asked them again, and they said no. And I thought to myself, can you remember when you were a teenager? Only a few years ago for you, I think.
If only.
That angst, I really felt this was my only chance, my big break. And I argued with them.
Yeah, someone's offering you your dream.
I said, it's $75 a week. Nothing else will ever happen to me in my entire life. So a few nights later, I say this, I talk about this in my show when I do it. I don't know, I saw too many B movies maybe. I packed a bag and snuck out of the house and ran away to rehearsals in New York. And my father took a plane and met me there and took me home. Yeah. And then eventually, as I say, they let me go. I don't know why, but we never talked about it, but all of a sudden I felt really bad that I had, betrayed them, their trust. And they let me go to do the job because I think they had a talk with one of my teachers, and she said, well, just let her go, and she'll realize and she'll come back.
So you were 16 when you came to New York.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who did you live with? What did you do?
We had revolving roommates on 54th and 8th Avenue at this apartment. I first lived at the YWCA, and I also, when I think about it, it was great. That's when New York was really kind of scary and funky and
gritty.
And those, gritty is right. And those rooms now, I say, are like condominiums that go for about $1 million. But back then,
Right.
yeah. But
so-
you know, it's like what people do today. It's like kids come to New York and now they can go and have a further education. I don't try to encourage running away from home at that age, because now what you have are there wonderful musical theater courses, right?
Right, all of the programs,
All over, and great
conservatories
teachers, and they have programs. And so when you come to New York, you are really prepared, because you have to be, because everyone is so good and the competition is so steep. You know?
After doing that, the tour of one-nighters, which, by the way, one-nighters means you're moving every day. It's not just like, oh, one night in New York and one night in New Jersey. You know, you're like, you're really moving around.
And this was before civil rights.
Yeah.
So that in itself was an incredible education for me, to really see the real world as much as I could in that way. It was mind expanding, to say the least. It was great to get back into New York. When you're that young, you're omnipotent and you think nothing could happen. You know, you feel kind of, I don't know, I felt very powerful in a way. When I look back, I can understand why my parents were terrified for me. But like I say now, I mean, I do master classes, and I see the talent that's out there, and it's phenomenal. And we keep helping each other evolve. So I would say make sure that you have your training under your.
Yes, your technique is so
that
important.
So you can come and stay.
Mm-hmm. So after that tour in the South, you came back to New York, or you went back home to Detroit?
I went right back to New York, because now I was fueled by this desire to show them, that I can stay. Excuse me, that I can do it. So it was very important for me to get a job and to pay my own rent.
Mm-hmm.
And
Was How to Succeed your first audition?
Well, I came into audition, and I did summer stock before that. I did a little West Side Story with the original choreography. So I was in heaven, to do this kind of work. I auditioned.
Is that the European tour of West Side Story, or that was here in the States?
It was a summer stock, but they were all Broadway dancers. So
Okay.
again, I was being
David Winter and
and they're very encouraged to keep going. I got a lot of encouragement. I auditioned. I did Louise in Carousel, and I brought that dance to the Broadway stage because when I was auditioning, or I still audition, but then they auditioned on Broadway stages, not in rehearsal studios.
Right.
Right.
You auditioned for Phantom of the Opera. You step onto the majestic stage.
Yeah. And so I did this dance, and Cy Feuer and Ernie Martin, who were the producers of How to Succeed and Guys and Dolls, he came. I was new in town, so he came running down the aisle, and he said, meaning, I think, where have you been? He said, what have you been doing? And I said, I've been doing the dance from Carousel. I looked at him like he was crazy. And so I went to the back of the theater, and Cy Feuer, who was a real Damon Runyon character, great fellow.
Oh, yeah.
And sat me down at the steps in the back of the theater and said, I'm doing a Broadway show, and I would like you to be in it. Would you like to do that? It's coming up soon. And I said, absolutely. I thought that's how you got into a Broadway show. A nice little conversation with the producer. So that was a great beginning for a young girl. And just quickly, I'll just say that the next 2 years, because that show was really a hit, it was a Pulitzer Prize winning show, I was in the room, as they say, with Frank Lesser and Abe Burrows, our director, and Bob Fosse and Gwen Verdon, who was acting. She was a great star, of course, acting as a dance captain for Fosse. And all of these wonderful people, and so I just went. I remember thinking, this is if I learn how to act, if I go to acting class, if I have voice lessons and learn how to sing,
Right.
I could be doing this for a long time, beyond the life of a dancer.
Well, I know that you've said that, so you got the job with How to Succeed, and you thought to yourself, well, I need to learn these things, and you took your salary, and you put it right back into classes and lessons. I'm wondering how you found, I mean, I hear you speak, and I especially now on your podcast, hearing you over the airwaves, and your voice is so distinctive, your singing voice is distinctive. How did you find the sound of your voice, the way to connect in a scene through those lessons, through those voice lessons and acting lessons?
I must say it was hard for me because I was very fearful, inhibited, shy, because growing up in the Midwest in the 50s, I can say that now because I've earned it maybe.
Definitely.
It was a challenge, and I became a professional student because I was so insecure about it. And so I really believe in study. I believe in experience, and I still study. I have a new voice. Well, he's not new, about a year. Voice teacher, because also what's important to know, if you want a long career, as you age, everything changes.
Right, your voice is a muscle.
Yeah, everything changes. So you have to stay. So I went to and get a tune-up, and I went, wow, there's a lot I still have to learn, and also for health, the health of the voice.
Right, but you really, I mean,
but it took me a long time.
Thinking of something like a number like Music in the Mirror, you really have such a strong belt, but in a way that wasn't broad like Ethel Merman or any of those women. It was really very individual. And did you ever think about the sound of your voice as a way to get cast, or something that you weren't sure if you'd be able to get cast? Or
I loved training classically. I mean, I loved the soprano voice.
Mm-hmm.
But I realized it's like ballet. The ballet training is a basis. It's good for your body, but it's also a basis to learn any other kind of dance, I think.
Absolutely.
And so I really wanted to learn voice production. I didn't want to learn style as much as, because I really, I think that in theater, it's all acting based. So the actor, you get everything from the text to the character, and then how does the character sound?
Right.
You're always going to have the core of you, because we're all so individual in our sound, and we want to find our sound. I think what I love about your question is that through freedom, through relaxation, and through real focus and intention, and those things will apply. So it took me a long time to find that freedom.
It's actually Liz Kaplan, who is a vocal consultant on so many different shows and works with everyone. That's like a basis of her practice, is teaching everyone how to relax, because so many people are producing sound through stress.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, of course, it's stressful to audition, right? But it's what happens when you let that go. What's the sound you hear then?
Yeah.
And yeah, it sounds like you found it.
On a good day.
I want to talk a little bit. You mentioned all of these people that you have had the pleasure to work with, whether it's choreographers like Fosse and Michael Bennett, or directors like George Abbott and Hal Prince. I'm wondering about some of the lessons that you learned from those individuals that either carried you on to the next thing that you would, when you did Promises, you were like, aha, but I learned in How to Succeed that this, or lessons that you carry through to today.
Well, you learn how to be a professional. You learn that everybody has their job to do. And you do learn so many artistic things and you learn from mistakes, from your own mistakes, but you also learn from seeing other people make mistakes. I think that's a classic example, the story about Promises. Now it's like every year I can count on Turkey Lurkey coming. Thank God for YouTube, right? But in the beginning, that was not a big hit. There's so many stories. There's so many stories like this about great Broadway shows, about on their way to that place of success.
Mm-hmm.
But so through, miscalculating, Michael Bennett, who was a great, it was so important for him. This was his first big hit as a choreographer, and it was so important for him to have always the touch of reality. Do you know what I mean? To be grounded in reality with these through dance
The characters in the story.
So he was being too realistic, and it just laid a big dud out of town, which is where we always solve those problems.
Right.
And so Bob Avian and Michael Bennett that night in Boston went to those hotel rooms where you have a mirror at the
the
closet.
tall mirror on the back of a door.
Well, they were standing there doing It's Turkey Lurkey. They did the whole number, put a whole dance together, and the next day they came in and did a whole other number, and it was just fantastic. So you have to let people make their mistakes sometimes, I think.
From having done so many original musicals, is there a uniform process that they kind of follow step by step, and it's the content that changes, or is really every musical its own animal?
I think so. It's if you've worked with people before, and that's why people like to work with people that they've worked with before sometimes, if it works, because they know what they're walking into and what they need for certain things or certain elements they need. But it's always like, I remember talking to the producers of Guys and Dolls and How to Succeed. They said, you can have all of the same people, the creative staff, on a different story, and it may not work out. You know?
Right. It's all the alchemy in the room.
Every show is unique.
Obviously, your work on A Chorus Line is iconic, but before we get there, I want to talk about Company, because I was watching the clips of original cast album Company and Drive a Person Crazy, and listening to Stephen Sondheim say, well, Donna knows, and she can do this.
Oh, I was flat.
It was a very, don't worry about her. She knows she's got this. And I just want to know about creating that character of Kathy in a concept musical, which wasn't, now we have a genre that we call it a concept musical. How do you find a character like that when it's just vignettes? Who was your Kathy?
Well, you have a backstory that it's your job as an actor, I think, to go in and have that's your work that you bring to rehearsal every day. And that was not easy. And I was still learning, about how to put these parts together. The dance was the most difficult because it was like a painting.
Which, by the way, so many people have seen more modern day companies. There was a dance that Kathy does called TikTok. That is, if you haven't seen the YouTube video, go find the YouTube video of this woman dancing it. It's unbelievable.
Well, and, thank you for that. But that video isn't even the real.
Right. It's not the real. Right.
It's not, because it was 7 minutes. But it was anyway, it was just an incredible thing. And I think from the first reading, we all knew what a special piece it was, because Stephen Sondheim had done the whole score already. It was all a fait accompli. It was just there.
Wow.
And as we read it, it was just an amazing cast. And it was a struggle out of town. A couple things, a couple bumps in the road, but honestly, Hal Prince, who I admire, I've always admired, and I will continue to admire him. We've just lost him, and he just had he was such a great gentleman of the theater and a great producer, and he knew what to do. And they would take numbers out, put numbers in, so you can imagine how stressful it.
Right, when you're building something that you don't know what it's not like a puzzle where you have the top of the box that you can look at. You're building something that has no.
Right. And, the people in charge, and Hal Prince and Stephen Sondheim, they weren't going to cater to everyone's idea or whim or they were trying to really say something and do something quite wonderful and do it their way.
Are you excited to see the boys do Drive a Person
Yes.
Crazy? I mean, how wild. It's amazing.
Can't wait to see the show.
speaking of, so we have Turkey Lurkey Time, we have TikTok, we have, of course, Music in the Mirror, which we're going to get to, I promise. Watching all of those videos, watching you dance Hullabaloo, there's a liveness, there's a vivacity, sometimes it looks like there's extra space in your joints. Was that just always how you moved, or was that what choreographers brought out of you?
I don't know. I honestly, I'm listening to you and I go, wow, that sounds really good. Wow. I don't know. I just loved to dance. I love to dance.
Was that always a collaboration with choreographers of playing to your strengths and playing to the way you moved naturally?
I mean, David Winters was, one of our icons, in West Side Story, and he choreographed it. And we were all eager to do that work, and it was television, and it was different and new, and it was like one step closer to Jerome Robbins, who everyone adored.
Right, the gold standard.
Oh, yeah, it was just a lot of fun. Listen, all those groups that came on, if you see any of those shows, they're just great.
Did dancing on television, was that ever different from dancing on a stage, or was it all just dancing to you?
Well, it was an amazing space. It's the studio where they have, at NBC, where they have The Tonight Show now. We had Peter Matz, I don't know if any of you remember, a great arranger, conductor. Peter Matz did all the arrangements with the NBC Orchestra, which was incredible. So we had all this live music we were dancing to, and it was very exciting.
Well, all of these things that we're talking about are such a collaboration to create a singular moment and a singular sensation, if you will, with a chorus line. So I want to talk about that, but I thought it might be fun if we had someone else join us on the stage.
Yes. Okay.
What do you think?
This is a surprise guest.
Surprise!
Let me just say just a couple words. She was, you might guess it right away, but she was Michael Bennett's assistant for so many years. She's a dancer, a choreographer, a director, a producer, and what else can I say? She's
Tony Award recipient.
Yes, she's a fantastic woman, and I'm really excited that she was able to come tonight to tell us more about a chorus line.
So without further ado, please welcome to the stage, Miss Bjork Lee. Yeah, sit next to each other. Sit close.
Yeah. Girlfriends.
So, a chorus line. I had the honor of speaking to Bob Avian, who was, of course, Michael Bennett's assistant, and you two recently did a chorus line together. Obviously, you've been doing it around the world so often, but a year ago doing it at City Center. And he was telling me that the original recording sessions, I had always heard the lore that Michael Bennett got a bunch of dancers together and started recording, but that actually the very first one was a gathering, and Michael said, "Can I bring my tape recorder?" And then turned into more recording sessions. I'm wondering what was the impetus for that first gathering that you all wanted to get together and be and talk?
Well, there were so many different versions. We heard that Broadway was dying, and the two dancers, Michonne Peacock and Tony Stevens, got the dancers together. What are we going to do if we can't dance on Broadway anymore?
Who are the dancers? Like, what does that mean? Like, is there a phone tree? Like, what's happening?
The dancers. Well, you have to realize at that time you had dancers, you had singers, and you had actors, and you did not cross-pollinate at all. So when Donna McKechnie talks about, wanting to sing, I would say, why does she want to sing? I mean, we can just dance, and there's singers out there. But she was thinking ahead, way ahead of her time.
Wow.
But yeah, we heard that Broadway was dying, and these two dancers got together and said, look, we came all the way from St. Louis, and what are we going to do? That was one.
They were in
version.
what show were they in? It was a show. It wasn't working. The show was not good.
Seesaw.
No, it was. I thought it was Rose and Blue.
Oh yes.
God bless you, Mr. Rosewater.
That was
No.
Rose and
Yes,
Blue,
thank
yes.
you, thank you.
But
That was the seed of it, right?
right. And that was the seed of
They
it.
would they would watch the show in the wings. Tony Stevens told me once that they would watch the show and they would always fix it. They would direct it. They would go, "Why don't they do that? Why are they doing that?" So they realized that as dancers, that they had a lot to offer. They had a lot of knowledge that they gleaned from doing all these shows.
So that show flopped, and
They wanted to do a show on their own.
they
wasn't
wanted to
it?
do a show on their own. But
was the
we
name
were
of it
doing
again?
Seesaw at the time.
No. The other Rachel, Lily, Rosenblum, and Don't You Ever Forget
Forget
It.
It.
Got it. Thank
Paul
you.
Chabarro.
Thank you, audience.
Paul Chabarro. So Michael Bennett was doing Seesaw at the time,
Right.
and there was an exodus of like 15 dancers, and they went to do this show. And they opened and closed in one night or something like that, and they were all back in Seesaw. So I had to put 15 more people in the show again. So
You were
I was
dance
a dance
captain.
And so what was this about, like, what are we going to do to stop this? What are we going to do after this happens? Was this
Well, then
just
I
a
think
comfort group?
They had they were talking amongst themselves, and then always, even when Michael Bennett was in the chorus, I feel that dancers looked up to him because they knew that he was determined to do something, to be a choreographer. I remember when I was doing Hullabaloo, I said, what are you going to do when you grow up? You can't keep doing this stuff, your whole
The
life."
swim.
And he said, "I'm going to be a choreographer." And he said it, and it was so serious. And I went, whoa, he's going to do it, and don't forget me. And so,
And he didn't.
No, he didn't. But the dancers, Tony and Michonne, took their idea of wanting to do a show about dancers to Michael Bennett because they knew that he would have he'd already had some success as a choreographer, right? And he knew that they knew that he would maybe, if he liked the idea, he would. And this is all timing because at the same time that they were thinking about doing this, he was thinking about doing a show for dancers, right? Okay.
Right, so it was the
That's the story.
fusion
We
of
got it
those
straight now.
story.
those ideas. So when you're in the room, Donna, you've talked about how the industry, the atmosphere of the industry today is very different than what it used to be. That you feel the community and you feel the support today, but at times it used to be a bit more cutthroat. So I'm wondering, in the room, did you feel comfortable to share with each other? Did it feel like a community?
I don't know about cutthroat because I know Michael.
Just competitive.
Yes, but also the choreographers and directors helped one another. Michael would go in, if the show was running, and the director would say, "Would you come in and look at the show and give us some notes?" Or a producer would call. I don't think they do that now.
Yeah, they're much more siloed.
Yeah.
So you start sharing your stories, and
Well, also, just to interject,
absolutely.
Thinking back on it, Michael started those sessions. I don't know, were you there with the...
Wasn't that the first?
The first one, okay. But what he did was he started, we all sat in a circle on a carpet, and there, when you say tape record, it was an eight track, reel to reel.
Yeah, a suitcase.
Enormous. And these wheels were going around, and Michael started with 3 questions that essentially became the questions that Zach asked the dancers. Would tell me your name, go around, tell me your name, where you were born, and why did you start dancing? That was kind of it. And we just, so him starting it gave everybody the license to, and
Share.
And the sharing became more and more sharing because the more we got into feelings and thoughts and memories, and we discovered, in discovering how much we had in common, secrets that people thought that they were, or things that people were ashamed to share, or they thought they would be judged.
Like what were the things that ended up in the show, or like
yeah,
what?
yeah.
Everything ended up in the
Yeah.
show,
Mm-hmm.
and stories
people
were
just-
combined.
Yeah, because there was so many people. That's when I asked you about who got up and started dancing when they heard music. You know, Michael discovered and the writers discovered that there were so many characters that had things in common. So he would make many people into one character, or parts of people into another character.
Right. So I know that Cassie, who you played, is an amalgamation of ideas and people, but that your story ended up as what the character we know as Maggie, originated by Kay Cole.
Parts of it, like parts of it, yeah.
What was it like?
And a lot of Michael is up there too. Yeah.
What was it like
You're up
to
there,
hear that
big
part of your
time.
story, though? Yes, well, don't worry. We're going to get to Connie. What was it like to hear your story and not be the one telling it? Were you able to let it go as a character? Was that difficult for you?
I felt so proud of the show that I remember it at the ballet. We would back up, and the first singer, Kelly Bishop, right, was Sheila. So, we would back up, and we would, in this velvet velour back, and we would all back up and turn and face the
upstage.
Yeah, and we would be in darkness, and I would be facing this black velvet, and I would hear the story of my childhood. And I remember thinking, I am so proud because and I felt it then, a long time ago, that this show would have a life that would go beyond anybody's expectations. I had no idea it would be 50 years. Isn't it almost 50 years? Almost.
We're at 45.
45.
But you know, it's like it's just wonderful. It's a profound feeling to know that this is why I love theater so much, because how we can touch each other, how we can, how much we have in common, really, and how people can sit in an audience and see and hear their stories on stage and be moved by it, have that experience of appreciating something new or a different perspective.
Conversely, Bjork, you played a version of your story. What was that like to? I imagine, you know, these sessions start as just sharing sessions with people you know, and then it grows into creating, but still in a room of people you know, and then suddenly, oh, here we are in a room full of strangers night after night. What was that like for you to share your actual story and play yourself?
Well, I said that I would jump off the George Washington Bridge if I didn't get to play myself. That was number one.
Well,
Because
I'm
we had
glad
to-
you played yourself then.
Because we had to audition for our roles. You know, I just remember going in and reading my dialogue, and I had to
That didn't
audition
even
for my
occur
life.
to me that you would have to audition. Like, because it came out of this workshop scenario, I thought it was like, okay, you know, like school, like, okay, and so you are this person and you are this person. You auditioned.
I had to audition. Yes.
Because not everybody who was in the original taping sessions were in the original show. Eventually, a lot of them did it, but originally, it was really about that's the hard part, I think. Yeah. And Trish Garland, who played Judy, I remember her saying, I got out on that stage and I saw my own dialogue about my life, and she said the pages were like shaking. So you know, really a Judy.
Yeah, written as
Turner
a script.
audition.
So playing yourself, was that liberating for you? Was that, what was that?
I
what
was
did that
scared to
feel
death
like?
because I was a dancer. And all of a sudden I'm speaking and a song is being written for me. And I didn't have the same desires that Donna had. I wanted to stay in the back and boogaloo
Yeah.
and have a good time. And all of a sudden now I am standing on the line and I'm in front. And I think most of us were terrified because we didn't have acting lessons. You know, we were dancers. I think Donna and Priscilla were the only ones that had acting lessons.
Wow. Do you find that at all now in all the work that you do of directing the show and bringing it around the world? Do you find that you really have dancers first who you have to bring singing and acting out of them, or has it totally changed that everyone's doing all three?
It has totally changed. Back in 1977 when we went to London, we had to do a workshop for singer, dancers, and actors. And then we went into rehearsal. And the same thing in Australia, and the same thing in Germany. Now we have all these wonderful schools with musical theater programs. It's totally different. I've done a chorus line in Italy 3 times. So the first time in 1990, we had to, ground floor. And now you go back and they're singing, dancing, and acting.
Yeah. So you stage a chorus line all over the world. Donna, you have worked with American Dance Machine in preserving choreography. And I think one of the most important things about it, that initiative in general, for those of you who don't know, is that you have people who learned and performed the choreography originally, teaching new company members, like the dancers of today, many of the people really who were in a chorus line at City Center. But what I love about it is that it shows that choreography is not just the steps, right? Like, choreography is not just dance. It's the story, it's the intention, it's what happened in the room, it's all of the 10 iterations that came before the final version of the original choreography. So what are you intent on preserving and communicating to those students that they have to know? When you dance music in the mirror, you have to know this.
Well, that's a hard one because that's an individual expression. And one of the first things, and what I really try to give anyone that I'm training or coaching, is you've got to make this your own. I can break it down and say, find it, the dance, the song goes into the dance, and it's like a one-act play. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And all these different things happen. And you have the individual dancer, the Cassie, who's ever dancing, has to find her own emotional life. And if she, and I'm sure you've dealt with this too. And then you find if there's something it's like when Michael worked with me or any of us, he would find your strengths and and support that, put that,
Front and center.
create to the strengths. And that's what sometimes I have to do with certain dancers, and I'm sure you do too. So the choreography is changed. The steps are changed because they're not the most important thing. What I love about Michael's work and Jerome Robbins and so many of them, and even the younger choreographers today that really tell the story, that seamlessness of it's what I said before. It's all acting based. You tell the story, and dance is so abstract,
Right.
You have to find. So anyway,
Well, it's guttural.
all over the place.
It's
That
base
dance,
instinct.
yeah.
A lot of it.
That dance, what you can impart as a director and a choreographer is to help them find the intent. What is this about? And Bjork has helped me a lot with that. Go back to what is this about? What is your intention? What are you doing? Like you would break down a song. What are you achieving? Are you getting close to getting what you need, what you want? It's a wonderful way before there was language, there was dance, there was
Right.
gesture. So what a wonderful way to, if
Express.
someone says, you can make this your own, that's what is wonderful about it. Then you use your own imagination and create your own world of emotional life where you can bring the audience in by just doing what you do. Because, it's a long-winded way of saying the steps aren't that important.
But when I'm teaching the dance, I have my Cassie to have her own dialogue. She writes a whole monologue while
Oh,
she
wow.
is dancing, and so the story becomes hers.
I love that.
Really, really important.
What was
So
the
it's
first?
not about kicking and turning
Right.
and spinning.
the layouts and the layouts and the layouts.
Not at all.
What?
At the end of it, when it was so long, when we were putting it together, and
They
I
do
was,
like to give you those long numbers,
Well,
don't they? They
no,
just want to
even
wear
Bob-
you out.
even Bob Avian, I said, Bob, why am I doing 4 sequences at the end? Why can't I just do 3? And he said, I know, 3 would be, it's like a good number. And I remember Michael said, I feel like I don't look like I can do it. He goes, that's the exciting part about it.
But it
In
also,
other words, he wanted it to look like it.
but what Theron Musser has done with the lighting is incredible because, I think 3 would be short because the lights change every time you do the pirouettes.
Still long. It's still long.
But speaking, so
No.
But it looks like then.
No.
But as an actor, I got it because you're going. Can she make it? Can she make it?
right, which is Cassie's whole story.
It's the metaphor for the struggle for all of us.
Right. You mentioned the lighting, and there's so much storytelling that goes on in the simplicity of the set, in the lighting, and in the costumes. And I am curious about how specifically the costumes evolve, because A Chorus Line is one of those shows that you maybe riff off of, but it really stays true to that original line that you see. Like, why was Cassie red? Why was Connie in overalls and a turtleneck?
So go ahead.
Because I wanted to be warm all night. And,
Theone Aldridge, our wonderful
changed
designer,
us.
she came to each one of us and said, "What do you want to wear? What do you feel comfortable wearing?"
And then she made a palette because the opening, even the dancers that are cut,
Right.
we're all in a palette. Yeah,
She
color
said,
palette.
"What color do you want?" And I went, "Red."
Right. I'm wearing my Cassie red for the occasion. What was the first number that you learned as a company? Did you start at the beginning with Hope I Get It?
No, we in the first workshop we learned the opening combination and also some of the vocabulary for the Cassie dance. That was the
Oh,
first
all of
one.
you learned that.
Yeah.
So interesting. What are some of the moments that, like, we know as iconic chorus line choreography that you can point and say, oh, that's when Priscilla did that and Michael said, yes, or that's when I did that and we said yes, or that's when Kelly did that. Are there moments that you can pick out and say, I know
Oh,
who?
yes.
Okay,
There's
please share. Please
There's
share.
a Tommy Walsh step. There's a Chrissy Wilczak step. There is
Which ones?
yes, Tommy
I-
Walsh is
And I
egg
did.
beater. That's Tommy.
Yes,
Walsh.
the
I
egg
did
beater.
a step when we were putting it together, the
This one.
opening. Right, but in the opening, turn, releve,
Pirouette.
I could never do it now.
Turn, arabesque,
Yeah.
pirouette,
And-
pas de chat.
And then I realized that I was like trying to show off for Michael, and it's going to stay in that opening number. and it's
Forever.
really hard.
Oh my gosh.
But there was one day when Bjork and Bob Avian and myself were put in a room, and Michael said, "Okay, do some steps for the finale." Right? That was fun.
And yep. And this is Donna McKechnie. Yeah.
Out in Vegas one night, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. When you took time away from A Chorus Line and then you come back, or then you do it in Japan or you do it somewhere else, what does anything change in your interpretation of the character because of just the life you
Well,
live?
it was, and thanks to Bjork, who I wasn't dancing, and she offered me this great opportunity, and I wanted it so much to be able to go on tour and then to Japan, and I said I don't know if I can do it, and she said I'll give you 3 months. So I got into shape, and the point I'm making is that to get back into that show, 10 years later. I always loved it, but it gave me I was 10 years older. My body was different. I actually was a better singer because I had studied. But as a dancer, I had more, I don't know, I was more integrated in a way. I was just older and better in some ways. There are certain things that were more challenging physically, but to have that opportunity to go back to the same theater, the same run, 10 years later.
Yeah, that's wild.
A different cast, and one of the things that I loved about that I got from them was that they got an opening night because I don't think they ever had been reviewed, right? So me going back to the show after 10 years.
Right, then critics came back.
I enjoyed it so it takes nothing away from the original because that was such a great, important experience, but I enjoyed it so much because I could go up, do the show, and leave Cassie in the dressing room. Do you know what I mean? And then I could go out to dinner with my friends. It was a great way to enjoy the show.
We also felt a big responsibility having created the show, working on it for a year. And then we opened the show, and all of a sudden we were like rock stars. And
Yeah.
especially you.
Well, and especially, I think it's hard, especially at a convention like this, to imagine what the theater district looked like at that time. That there were empty theaters, you guys. Like there were billboards in Times Square that said, like basically, if you're bored, come see a Broadway show. Like, could you think now people cannot get theaters, and then a chorus line happened, and it was like Broadway is back. Like you were the saviors. So yeah, of course you were rock stars.
Like rock stars. And Bloomingdale's had a window with all of, the paraphernalia.
It was exhausting.
It
right?
was
We
exhausting.
did a lot of work.
And
So I
so
think
we couldn't enjoy it.
Mm.
And of course Michael wanted us there because Tony people were coming, and
Right.
also at the same time he was putting on a company in Los Angeles and a company, a touring company. So we were working with 3 companies at the same time, and he would say, "You've got to perform tonight because the Tony people are coming," and we were rehearsing all day
Yeah.
because
What was it like to perform that show on the Tony Awards for the room full of people in the
and it was in our
business and the
theater,
performers and yeah.
in our theater, which was great.
I mean, what was that? Did that feel like a different Tony Awards to you? I mean, obviously you won.
I thought it was a great Tony Awards because
Because
not
you
because
won.
of that. No, not because of that. That now that you mention it, it was our home. So it had the feeling tone of we're the hostess with the mostest, and we're throwing this big party, and you're all
You're all invited.
and thanks for coming, and then we all celebrate each other by doing our kicks at the end, and everybody was, it was a very fitting, a very appropriate, and very
Yeah.
celebratory.
I mean, Broadway is luckily and for a lot of effort not dying, but what is coming to Broadway changes a lot, and what it looks like is very different. And this idea of the line, this idea of the ensemble, there are fewer and fewer shows that have big ensembles. I don't know if that's just, some of it is clearly financial, and some of it is just taste that this story doesn't need as many
Like
people.
like you were touching on before about now, young theater students that they have to if they want to be professional, they have to learn to sing, dance, and act.
Right,
And
at least.
and there's so many wonderful when you see an ensemble of people working together, telling this story together in a magical musical way. It's wonderful. The days of a line of dancers and a line of singers. That's over.
Right, but in terms of the ensemble, even the ones that do all 3, I think we're seeing a lot of shows with smaller ensembles rather than big ensembles. Like, Wicked has a massive ensemble, but that bowed on Broadway 15 years ago and is luckily just still around. But newer musicals have smaller ensembles, and I'm wondering just what your thoughts are on the evolution of that.
I just think it's what does this tell the story? Is this accomplishing what it's set out to do? And I think a lot of it is practical thinking too. That is financial.
Financial also.
But I think I've just seen such wonderful things the last 2 seasons with ensembles, and they weren't majorly big shows, but they were
Ensemble shows,
very
too.
complete, very satisfying, beautiful.
Broadway, I remember listening on the edge of my seat to Hal Prince talk about how different Broadway is now, some things for the better, some things maybe, in his opinion, not for the better. But I'm wondering, as things continue to change, even in just the last 5 years, what's something we cannot afford to lose in the industry, in the DNA of what theater is and does?
Real people.
And talent.
Yeah.
I don't think it's just getting a name up there to sell tickets. I think we really, really need people who can do their.
And that goes back, too, to this whole conversation of technique that we've been talking about. I mean, you said earlier about how ballet is that foundation and that you still go to class now. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, because I think there are aspiring performers in this audience, about the importance of technique. And because I also think there's such a variety of people working in the business, and some people think you don't really need technique, but I beg... my hurt body begs to differ.
You know, I'm auditioning all the time, and I go, oh my God, there's technique there. They can actually point their feet. Yeah, it's
Little things in life.
It's really, really amazing what's required today. But shows like A Chorus Line, you need your ballet technique, you need your jazz. You know, you have to be able to tap. I mean, all three. It's really.
Then you have to be able to sing after your dance break and music in the mirror.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of the shows don't. It's not required, and so students are not taking ballet, and you know they're into hip hop, and there's nothing wrong with that. But then they come to my audition, and you know I want they can't even do a ballet pirouette. You know.
Right, so it's really important.
It's very important. Technique is really, really important.
We've really been focusing on A Chorus Line, but it's not just A Chorus Line that this applies to, obviously.
No. And I think the other thing is that when you get into a show, you know, we've been waiting for a Broadway show, and so you never take a class ever again, or a voice class or anything. You have to keep up your craft if you want to be an artist.
Yes. We've been talking about A Chorus Line, but of course, you know, Donna, I listed so many of your credits. Bjork, you started out when you were 5 in The King and I, and, you know, Flower Drum Song, and all of these amazing shows. I'm wondering if you look back on your career and you could go back to only one of the shows that you did and perform in it one more time, what would it be?
That's a tough one, isn't it? What would it be? Well, I don't think it would be A Chorus Line. I love that show maybe more than any other. But I feel so satisfied that I just sound weird, like I did it.
No, you've done it a lot.
There's no unfinished work. It was. I think
Is there one that does feel like you could use another go at it?
Last Menagerie. Yeah, that play.
Because don't forget, she's an actress.
I need to do that one go at it. Wasn't in a wonderful setting, but it was not many weeks. And when we closed, this happens a lot to people. I think you just feel like now I know what I'm doing, so now I want to do it again.
What about you, Bjork?
Well, I'm a dancer, so I think it'd be Promises, Promises. I love that turkey lurkey dance. I love to shake my head.
Was there a job that at the time you didn't get and you were devastated about, and you just thought, oh no, what am I gonna do? I didn't get this job. Two successful ladies up here.
We both feel
No,
like this.
there's so many of them. I mean, the fear. I mean, stage fright sent me to therapy. By the way, I want to say, if you need help, please don't be afraid to go find help. It's all out there. Because I was really, really scared to go out and have a voice in any way. And I had such stage fright, and I couldn't get auditions when I started becoming more comfortable. And so I went to therapy to find out what this was. So now I think it's something that is now when I see students and I say, you know, that part of our feelings that comes up, we have to respect that. It's part of the sensitivity. We don't want to diminish, but you have to find that energy and find the confidence. And this goes back to the only way, and I've learned it from every great choreographer and director, the only way they know how to feel confident in a part or anything is to repetition. Really rehearse, train, or whatever you need to find your confidence.
Right, find your confidence.
So when you go out there for the first time, you know what you're doing and you feel like you can.
But it's a business that trades in empathy, so you have to know what you're offering. I'm wondering, do you have a favorite show that you were never in, and that maybe you weren't right for at the time, you didn't even audition, but that you were just like, I love that show? And
how specific?
There
When the
you go.
sky is a bright canary yellow. I always wanted to do that. Can't do it now.
What about you, Bjork?
Oh my goodness. Sound of Music. I
Oh.
wanted to be one of those kids.
I always wanted to be Brigitte with her book. Surprise to no one. Before we wrap up, I want to just touch on, you two recently reunited because Donna has launched a podcast on the Broadway Podcast
Yes.
Network.
Broadway Podcast Network, everybody.
The Ladies Who Lunch.
Ladies Who Lunch, filmed at Sardi's. Bjork was you started us.
If you haven't listened, the very first episode, way to open strong. It's Donna hosting Bjork, Priscilla Lopez, and Kelly Bishop. Don't worry, I did not retrace steps, so you will get a lot out of that episode. But, how are you picking your guests? What does it feel like to record? This is a new era, a new frontier.
It's very new, and I'm just loving it. I'm having so many wonderful. Freddie Walker Brown, are you in here still? She might have left. She's on it. She was, the original.
She's there. She's there.
Is she there? We just have the most incredible women on it, and not just actors, singers, dancers, conductors, composers, playwrights. It's great. So thank you for mentioning that, and thank you
Absolutely.
for doing it.
Thank you all
Ladies
so
Who Lunch.
much.
Oh, I have to say one thing.
Yes.
I have a new show. I want you to all come. I don't know how many people are here. I think we can fit in. It's at the Green Room, March 19th, 20th, and 21st. A new
In room
show.
42.
Green Room.
Well, there you go. You have
Thanks.
ways to listen to her in your ears, ways to see her and listen to her in person. Ms. Donna McKechnie,
you,
Ms.
Ruth.
Bjork Lee, thank you so much for being here with us. And continue to enjoy BroadwayCon 2020. We'll see you next time.
You are way off track. Can't you see I'm different? Or are you still that blind? No, you stand right there and take it. There's no love to hide behind. Well, I am proud to tell you